Just wanted to give you a minute to want to share your screen. I haven't done a thing to the slides, so hopefully they're hopefully they're good. I can like kick us off, and do you want to take it from there? Oh, and you're muted.
Unmute. Hang on a second. Let me turn off my captions. Okay, and I will share my screen.
We only have 3 people so far.
And then presentation.
And I don't see our speaker. Did you give the speakers our
I did.
Okay.
I did, and I didn't hear back from him, so I'm mildly worried, but we have other things we can talk about. So
Oh wait, like you asked, but they didn't respond.
no, they responded, they confirmed, but I also then Friday said, hey, remember again, here's the Zoom login, here's my phone number if you need to text me. Didn't hear back, so hopefully he's just busy.
Okay.
I don't know.
And you gave him like a chunk of time to present and all that? Okay.
Told him 15 minutes.
Okay.
So
I was really hoping we get a few more here. Yeah, that email you sent was to the whole group on the listserv, I mean on the invite, right?
correct.
And here's somebody else, Mary.
Mary, and then this is a new person that I have took the liberty of inviting, Mary Limbo Fry. She's with HUD, and she's a good egg.
Okay, cool. I hope there's more that come. I'm gonna admit the folks that are here. Hello, everybody. Happy, what is today? Wednesday? Oh, maybe we don't say happy on 9/11. It's nice to see everybody though. Hope you're doing well on your corner of the world. We're gonna let some more people kind of strain in here as we start. Can you believe it?
Nice to see you. And Brett, that's the name I was trying to remember this morning. I was like, what's his name? What's his name? It's not Ben, it's Brett.
Mm-hmm. A lot of bees.
See you, Laura.
Well, we're glad to see everybody. Can you believe it's our 27th meeting? As always, we do this like every other month now. And I'm going to let Lori just take it from here as we continue to let folks in. I think we have a good discussion for you today.
I hope so. We'll find out. Whoops. So, hey, Robert, nice to see you. Thank you. This is a group of, if nothing else, people that care about tribes and are data nerds, really. And we're here to exchange knowledge on tribal adaptation and resilience data needs and share what we know, and kind of like meet each other so that when somebody has something they need or they're doing, they don't have to start from scratch. You can toss your name and who you work with, where you're coming from in the chat. And then just from my, Mary is somebody kind of new to the group. Do you want to introduce yourself, Mary?
Yeah. I just put it in the chat. Thank you so much for inviting me, Lori. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Mary Linda Blatt Fry, member of the Colville Confederated Tribes in Washington State, and I'm the tribal liaison for the Department of Housing and Community Development. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And Robert's going to be one of the people that do a presentation this morning. We met when he sent out an email that I found interesting about his work with the Southern California Association of Governments. And it really meshed well with what we're doing here. So he's going to present for us in a bit. Do we have any announcements from anybody that's joining us?
If you want to go to the next slide. So yeah, we do this every meeting. Basically, we're looking, and I'm Angie Hacker for folks that don't know me. I'm with Prosper Sustainably. We're the lead consultant for the Tribal Climate Health Project. We've been around for about 8 years. We build capacity for tribes to prepare for the health and other impacts of climate change. And we've been doing this National Tribal Resilience Data Work Group for, I don't know, 3 years or something by now. And so part of what we do here in the beginning all the time is just, since we are all sort of ideally subject matter experts in tribes, climate change, health, and data, we like to share some information. So if you have anything that you would like the other members of this group to know about, or if you have questions and you're trying to mine the hive brain, this is a good opportunity to do that before we get into the meat of our discussion. And we had something to share on our end, actually, right, Lori?
Yeah, Ben had brought up, and I don't have that. I have to go up because I don't have an actual brain. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my slide thing. The Delta Stewardship Council released a draft of the tribal and environmental justice thing. And I will send out a link to everybody in case you want to comment on it. Did you have anything more on that, Ben?
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's open for public comment, I believe, for a little while. I don't think it closes in like 2 weeks, although of course, as I say that, in my mind, September 30th is like flashing, but it should be open for public comment for a while, and it would be great to get input and feedback from this group, and please do also pass it along to get folks who also may be interested. They're definitely open to a lot of people reading it, and they've been working on it for, I think, a long time. So that'd be great to get a lot of good input on it.
Thanks so much,
And
Ben.
I'm going to drop something here in the chat too, just from our end. Folks know, oh, Brett, you should talk about that too. You already know we're doing a summit. It's on November 6th and 7th at Paula. We have a lot of folks already registered. It's a smaller summit, and it's on tribal climate and health adaptation. And this year we're focusing on the theme of taking action to protect health from wildfire, drought, and heat disasters. We have a pretty great lineup of speakers already, and tribes from all over the country, probably a group total of about 60 people, and we'll do a field trip looking at Fort La Jolla's reservation that did undergo a gigantic wildfire, but talking to their fire chief about that. And folks from all over the country, they're going to be sharing their experiences and knowledge around how they're actually moving past planning and into action. So that there's still opportunities for other folks to register. You can pass that along to your networks. That would be wonderful. The other thing we wanted to mention too from the Tribal Climate Health Project is we are applying for a new round of BIA dollars. Some of you may know that the climate resilience funding is available now. That's how we run the National Tribal Resilience Data Work Group. And we'd like to continue to do that. But the larger picture of that application is going to be around extreme heat and providing summary analysis for tribes in Southern California around extreme heat. And tying in, Colleen, with the work that we're doing with the Public Health Alliance, we received a CEC grant to develop a tool with the Healthy Places Index that builds upon the easy tool that we built. Long story short, there's going to be some functionality, a new tool developed specifically for tribes in California for extreme heat. And then on top of that, we can build out some actual real prepared analysis for the tribes that are going to participate. If you are an extreme heat enthusiast, think this sounds interesting, and otherwise have an interest in participating with us on this, we'll be developing letters of support, and we'll be sending out a template to this group. If you're interested in providing a letter of support and helping us in various ways, we would take it and appreciate it. I don't know, Colleen, if you might want to say a few words about what we're doing together.
Yeah, so it's basically what Angie just said. But yeah, it's gonna be tribes will have the ability to define their own reference area in terms of like a collection of census tracts, and be able to visualize primary and secondary exposures. So like the primary exposure will be extreme heat, but they'll also be able to visualize secondary exposures like smoke or particulate matter, etc. Things that interact with extreme heat to make it worse, alongside vulnerability measures primarily taken from the Healthy Places Index. So yeah, that should be an exciting project. We're kicking it off next week. So
After a long journey in contract execution. So thanks for your patience there. I see that Brett has something. Maybe do you want to raise that up, Brett?
Yeah, sure. The Climate Impacts Group out of University of Washington led a series of listening sessions with coastal tribes of the Pacific Northwest, I believe about a year and a half ago at the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians Winter Summit. Basically, some of you may have seen the Unmet Needs Report out of Alaska from the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. The same idea here. And basically, they just put together a report with some of the key barriers and some of the key areas of success. It's, as far as these reports go, it's quite short and quite straightforward. It's not data focused, but always relevant, right? So just wanted to put that in there in case folks wanted to check it out.
Yeah,
Thank
those
you.
guys were going to be here today, but they got busy, so they're going to be here in November talking about
Oh,
that
good to know.
report and the data
Cool.
gaps that they found while doing that. So it should be pretty interesting.
That'll be awesome. Glad to hear that.
The report's excellent too, and it's beautiful. If you haven't read it, it's really, I like a pretty report.
All right. Anything else? Your corner of the, you want to just give us any updates, what you're working on, or any opportunities we should be aware of? For part of what we like to talk about is there opportunities for us to comment or advise on anything that's happening out there, or maybe something's being developed, or there's a policy issue, and we could help bend it in the direction to help provide greater access to tribes for climate-related data.
I can give a few updates or connections. Christian here from the California State Water Board. We are currently working on a new climate resolution. Hopefully, I've probably talked with a couple of you before as well about this. So the last climate resolution from the California State Water Board was in 2017. And so we'd like to update it and create a new resolution that would focus on eventually creating an action plan, which would be separate from resolution, which would probably be the first kind of action plan from the State Water Board of California. So we definitely would want the tribes that are in California to provide input and talk to, I'll be at the, hopefully, depending on budget issues, at the summit to talk to some folks about that as well, but we'll keep like this group and other groups informed. I don't know if folks had been able to go to the OEHA, which is the California Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessment Climate Series on Oceans. There was a presentation from the State Water Board on using the State Water Board's geo-tracker to track the underground storage units, which can be, you know, like gas or other types of storage units underground for sea level rise issues. And so this is a new project. I'll put what we have so far is just this video. We don't have it because they're just getting the funding now, so they haven't established something on a website. So I'll give you the link to the presentation so that you're aware that this is happening. This is so that due to sea level rise, certain contaminants can get mobilized from these underground storage units. And so the State Water Board is trying to track that in relation to sea level rise, possibly other indicators. And then finally, I just have a question about the extreme heat tool that is being made. have you made any connections with the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research, OPR? Because they also have been working on extreme heat as well, and a tool of some sort analogous to their to OEHA's. Oh, sorry, that's OEHA. OEHA's extreme heat tool that is analogous to the coronavirus screen. OPR is also working on the vulnerable communities platform, which may also have an extreme heat component. So there are a number of groups working on various types of indicators, and I know that healthy places is also a good one.
Yeah, we've had the vulnerable communities folks come here. And I've talked to them quite a bit. I know it's still in development. And OPR, well, that is OPR, right?
Yeah.
Or actually Lucy by now. And then, yeah, who runs chat again? Who's responsible for chat?
That's resources.
Yeah. There's a variety of tools. So the idea here is that what we built out in the easy tool, which is really in just a spreadsheet form, has a lot of indicators that are meaningful to tribes and wanting to start with extreme heat, but have some functionality here eventually for other exposures as well. We really like the Healthy Places Index. I point people to it all the time just for its visualization, and seemed like a way to provide a pathway to tribes that could be really protected and also specific.
Yeah, and we've been in contact with OPR and the folks doing the vulnerable communities platform, and we've provided some input to them. And I think the thing with overlapping tools is that they overlap in some areas, but they've got different and useful functionalities in other areas. So I think it's important to have something that's really easy to use, which I believe most Esri-based platforms, for me at least, are not. And yeah, I think this was specifically geared towards tribes, and I think that's important as well. So
Yeah, I agree. I think especially tools specific for various specific communities are important.
Thank you, Chris. And you're making me think too. I just wanted to make sure folks know we have Lori has helped launch a tribal advisor group for the Tribal Climate Health Project, and they are now compensated to be our advisors for 2 years. Their first assignment was to do these interviews that we're conducting right now in partnership with Ben and Noah. But we don't have them fully subscribed for all of the engagements that they're sort of compensated to participate in. And if you have something that you are trying to maybe get in front of tribes, and if it's related and relevant to the Tribal Climate Health Project, including potentially data, there's an avenue there for that. So you can reach out and talk to us about that. Anybody else? Okay. Or do you want to take us into the next one?
Yep. Robert, I'm going to stop sharing so that you can be better seen.
Great, thanks, Lori. How are you? Good to see everyone.
I'm good. Nice to see you again, Robert.
Yeah, so happy to do a quick intro and talk a little bit about what we're doing, but just really happy to be part of this group and thrilled that Lori was able to connect me with you all. I can take a couple minutes and just talk about an ongoing initiative that we have at Brookings that I think might be of interest to you all. I want to kind of share what we're doing, get any reactions you all might have, answer any questions, and then if there are any comments or input or anything you want to provide, would really love it. But I'll give you a quick background. So Winnie, I guess for you all it would be Winnie with Tompan. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for having me. Netasuis Apunakishki Katahanet, Nuwamp Nomkan Thomas Masipia. My name is Rob Maxim. I'm a citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. For those who don't know, we are the indigenous people of southeastern Massachusetts. Already got a DM from Brett that he is from the area, grew up on Wampanoag land, so really cool to be connected with you all. I'm also a fellow at the Brookings Institution, where I lead our work around tribal economies. So one of my areas of focus is really how Native people and Native nations are represented, and I would argue in my work misrepresented in particular economic data sets, but data more broadly. So what I want to do today is talk to you all about an ongoing project that we have with the Southern California Association of Governments. So Lori's been a great resource for us and has really emphasized this group and some of the work you're doing. What I'll say is our project is it's looking at data. It's not looking specifically at climate data, but I think climate data is a key part of our work. So I'm going to go through a couple slides. I can share them in a second. You're going to see a lot of focus on like demographic data in the slide deck. It's kind of our template intro deck. But just know that like our work is going well beyond demographic stuff. It's quite, climate, I think is a huge and important part of this, given, the needs of tribes and their priorities. So, really interested to hear a bit more about kind of what you all are doing and whether you think there's anything that you would want to contribute to this. So let me just start here. I'm gonna, if I can, share my screen. Let me see. Can you all see this? Did this work? Great. So let me just start with sharing a little bit of context on SCAG and Brookings. So you may know this about SCAG, so I'm sorry if this is repeat information, but not everyone does, so I figured I'd go ahead and share it. So SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments, they're the largest metropolitan planning organization in the US, and they oversee 6 Southern California counties: Imperial, Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, and Ventura counties. Within their 6-county region are 191 cities, 37,000 people living on tribal land, and depending on how you count it, anywhere from like 200 to almost 400,000 people identifying as American Indian or Alaskan Native. So SCAG, as an association of governments, has as one of its primary missions to work with the various governmental entities across the 6-county region, including tribal governments. I think within their board too, I'll just note they have 7 voting policy committee seats representing tribal governments, so that they're now thinking about kind of how they engage with tribes more deeply and what role tribes play in their governance, but then in the region more broadly. Our organization, the Brookings Institution, is a research and policy think tank based in DC. Specifically, our program Brookings Metro focuses on policy with an eye toward demographic inclusion. So as part of our work, we frequently develop data products. So one of our most well-known is called the Black Progress Index. And I can drop it in the chat after, but it was an index that used localized data to explore how place-based factors affect the well-being of Black Americans in different communities across the nation. So we began our partnership with SCAG in late March of this year. SCAG originally approached us with the idea of creating a Black Progress style index product for Native American communities in Southern California. But we found there were really 2 limitations with that effort. So the first was we asked them, like, have you done any work with tribes on this? Is this like in demand in the region? And they really hadn't. So we felt that they really needed to hear from tribes and other stakeholders in the region about what types of data products tribes wanted to see. And then the second is, we just did some preliminary analysis to determine if building this type of index would even be possible. And we found that really across multiple data sets, from the Census Bureau to the CDC to others, there were data quality issues that were so significant that it basically prevented us from putting together any sort of statistically significant findings. So basically, even if we wanted to build this type of data product and there was demand for it, we wouldn't be able to. So we worked with SCAG to really refine this project, and now it has 3 goals. The first is we're aiming to identify the data needs within federal, state, and other data for tribes and Native American people in Southern California. I think it's relevant for this region, Southern California, but also for places across the nation and across the state. I think what the tribes are dealing with in Native communities more broadly, I should say, are dealing with in terms of data in Southern California are really representative of a lot of different regions. So to help achieve that goal, we are planning and are in the process of exploring new ways that regional organizations in particular, like SCAG, can partner with tribes, tribal leaders, native-led organizations, and other groups to help fill in some of those data gaps. That's one of kind of the key points I want to emphasize of our work. We're really taking a regional look at this. I think there's a pretty clearly defined like federal tribal relationship, and there's data issues that go along those avenues. Within the state tribal relationship, there's a whole set of other issues. But at least with the federal relationship, there's like a very clearly defined trust and treaty obligation. For regional organizations, that legal obligation doesn't exist in the same way. And so what we're trying to do is say, to the extent that regional organizations who often do have tribes, on their voting committees, et cetera, want to engage with tribes on issues of relevance or governance, what are some of the ways they can do so? And what are some of the value adds that regional organizations can have? And then at the end of this year or early next, we're planning to publish a public-facing report in partnership with SCAG. And that report is hopefully going to advance some new approaches to improving data collection and quality for tribes and native communities while also respecting tribal sovereignty. So our goals are really twofold. The first is we want to raise awareness of some of the ongoing challenges that both agencies and native communities are facing when it comes to data. These challenges aren't new by any means. I bet that everything we have in our report is going to be just like really familiar to folks on this call. But I think a lot of folks that don't work in Indian country with a lot of regularity might not be aware of those challenges. And so we at Brookings interface with a lot of policymakers who don't think about Indian country often, and we're hoping to really bring these issues to the forefront. And then we want to help name some really policy and programmatic steps that can help begin alleviating some of those challenges. So just to take a step back, why does good data matter, and what do we mean by data? So we at Brookings are a research organization. So for us, good data is essential to good research, but it's also about a lot more than research, especially for tribal governments. We argue that good data matters for two fundamental reasons. The first is it's an essential component of safeguarding tribal sovereignty. And second, it's necessary to ensure that the federal government, states, and other stakeholders meet their trust and treaty obligations and other responsibilities to tribes. Without good data, we think it becomes more difficult to effectively manage many of the core aspects of tribal sovereignty and the trust relationship, including in areas like economic development, health and well-being, environmental protection, education, access to federal, state, and other funding, and in a whole bunch of other areas. So for us, this is really about helping ensure that tribes can function effectively as sovereign entities and help non-native government organizations work more effectively with their tribal partners. So, the word data is really broad. Almost anything can be data, and that's one of the challenges we're confronting in this piece. I'll, think specifically about climate data. So I'm happy to keep the conversation focused on that because I think it's an area too that we're less familiar with. So I was really glad to be connected with you all. But we are broadly speaking going to touch on 6 categories of data that we have heard from tribal leaders are relevant to their decision making. So the first is demographic data, in particular data from the Census Bureau. The second is labor market data. The third is business and entrepreneurship data. The fourth is geospatial and planning data. The fifth is environmental data. And the sixth is health data from sources like the CDC or the California Health Information Survey. Obviously, that list isn't comprehensive. So, if there are other areas that you're working in that we're not including here, we're happy to talk about those as well. So, what I might do is just quickly give you a couple of illustrative examples of how existing data, presents challenges for native communities. And again, you'll probably know all this, but I just want to share it because this is kind of the top line story that we've been telling to folks. And then I can pause and answer any questions. And then if, we have a couple minutes, can share some of our top line findings so far. So again, these next slides focus on demographic data. That's not because demographic data is the sole focus of our report. is just illustrative and really helpful in showing really the order of magnitude about how bad some federal data sets can be for tribes and native communities. So the graphic on the left here, it shows the variance in just the raw count of Native American people in the United States across 3 federal data sets. The first is the decennial census, and then after that are 2 versions of the census's American Community Survey. So for the US population as a whole, there's a variation of about a 0.5 percentage point across these 3 data sets. But for Native Americans, the variance is about 32% across these 3 data sets. It's as if 3 million Native people just disappeared between 2020 and 2022, depending on what data set you choose. And then on the right here is data from those same 3 data sets for the state of California. And again, when you get to the California level, the variation is twice as large. It's about 66% variation across these 3 data sets, accounting for over 500,000 people. So why am I showing this? I think our point is that if we know the data varies this much by source, just like with the most basic measure, right? Like the top line count of Native people, then, it's obviously going to create challenges for tribes when they want to use any sort of data at the individual tribe level. And that's exactly what you see when you look at tribe level data. So going on to the next slide here. So again, this just uses basic population data as an illustrative example. But what we see is that the data varies significantly depending on what source you use, right? With significant variance that some public data basically becomes useless at the tribal level. So I pointed out 3 kind of tribes here that I think are just like really illustrative of the kind of, 3 different challenges that tribes face. The first was with the Augustine Band, right? Just like no data at all publicly available. So it's either suppressed or they just list the tribe's population as 0. For another one, Kauai, right? Just massive variation. Depending on the source you choose, they might have 0 people or 20 people or 1,300 people. And by the way, that tribe has told us their enrollment is 450. So all these numbers are completely wrong. And then you have other ones that, cross state boundaries. So state data doesn't always align with the tribe's data, right? So for example, the Colorado River tribes, which are right on the border of, California and Arizona, you see that depending on the source you use, you may see a population of 140, or you might see a population of 2,500. And so, the challenge for us, I think, is that these numbers tend to be pretty far off from reality, but these are the numbers that a lot of federal programs use when they interact with and fund tribes. So when they're off in either direction, that can be really problematic for tribes. In our view at Brookings is that data variance of this magnitude really makes conducting the basic functions of government substantially more difficult. And then last, I'll right before I pause, I'll just share 2 other kind of data points on what federal data says about Native people in California. So, on the left, you can see most people classified as American Indian or Alaska Native in California are multiracial or multi-ethnic. About 2/3 of Native Americans in the state are classified as Hispanic, and only 11% are classified as American Indian or Alaska Native alone. So why does that matter? For a lot of federal data sets and a lot of state data sets, you often see these kind of mutually exclusive racial categories, with Latino people being top coded. So you'll see like white, non-Hispanic, Black, non-Hispanic, Hispanic, Asian, non-Hispanic, Native, non-Hispanic, and then there's always like that catch-all 2 or more races. Most data sets from the federal government are classified that way. And when that's the case, American Indian data in the state of California in those data sets accounts for about 11% of the state's total Native American population. It's like surveying 5 states and saying this is like the status quo in the United States as a whole. And then on the right, we're just looking at who consists of the Native American population in Southern California. So, obviously it's a significant hub of Native life within the US. You can really see that from this chart. So over 93% of Native people living in the 6 counties served by SCAG are from communities outside of California. Again, so why am I talking about this? Obviously, it presents challenges both for how Native Americans are classified in data in the state, but also for determining which groups exactly that we're talking about when we discuss Native American people in the region. There's a real focus on tribes, but then when you use raw data in a lot of cases, it's actually not measuring tribes, it's measuring Native American people, and a lot of folks don't understand that distinction. So before we move on, maybe I'll just pause here real quick and see if folks have any questions or comments so far. Again, I know this is really focused not on climate stuff, but wanted to share some of the really basic intro level content that we've been talking with folks about.
It's really interesting. I'm sort of interested. Can you tell us a little bit about like a use case that SCAG would have? In what ways do they need this data? What are they going to do with it?
Yeah, so
Or
SCAG itself, SCAG itself, I'll kind of give you 2 points there. The first is just a broader step back, is SCAG itself is not looking to collect data. And this comes back to the fundamental focus of our project, which is that there's this really kind of nebulous relationship between regional organizations and associations of governments, which in theory represent tribes, and then the tribes themselves. And I can talk about that some more in some of my findings. But I think SCAG is, rather than looking to collect data and use it itself for any reason, is instead looking to figure out, how can it more effectively engage with tribes, and what can our role as a regional organization be that can bring a value add to tribes. They feel like they don't totally know that. They think that they have an idea that some other MPOs across the US and areas with large tribal populations may be doing a bit better. But in general, I think the feeling is that for regional entities, even though they in theory represent tribes, they feel that there's not a clearly defined relationship with tribes, and that they therefore are not doing everything they can do to support their tribal partners, who they are supposed to be, representing and supporting in a lot of ways. So, the goal for SCAG isn't to collect data per se, although there may be some opportunities that we're exploring around them lending some of their data expertise in-house to support tribes, and I can talk about that if folks are interested. But a second use case, like maybe a more specific one. So SCAG does act as a pass-through for some state funding to tribes in the region. So there are some state and federal funding sources that get routed through NPOs and in other regional associations of governments. And when municipalities apply, they can just rely on federal data, whether that is census data or state or federal climate data, or kind of the standard off-the-shelf data products that a lot of counties, municipalities, and others are just able to take for granted. Tribes are put at a disadvantage for applying for some of those funding opportunities because the data is bad to the public data is bad to the point where they can't use it. And then in other cases, tribes are generating data, they either just through their operations, or they have, in some cases, really sophisticated data operations around GIS, climate, and others. But they either can't use it because it's not accepted by the funding agency, or because of Freedom of Information Act laws, if they were to submit their confidential data, it would need to be made public, and they're not comfortable with that. So tribes are missing out on funding opportunities, for example, because of how bad this public data is currently, and the really I would say hostile rules around tribal data submission for funding opportunities. So for us, again, the use case for SCAG at a high level is they're trying to really figure out, we don't know what our role is in working with tribes, even though we are statutorily supposed to be supporting them and representing them, and we're trying to help them figure some of that out. And data underlies all that. And then the second is, really to the extent that they are supporting tribes through funding, are there better ways to go about doing that?
Thank you.
Yeah. what I can do next is I can just really quickly, go through the kind of 7 emerging findings that we have. These are really early draft findings. Some of them may be wrong. Others, or maybe all of it, might seem like obvious to this group. But in the conversations we've had with a lot of non-native entities across the region, they have not been obvious, and folks are learning a lot of this for the first time. So what I can do is I can kind of share what we've heard, and then we can take a couple minutes at the end, and I think the thing I'd love to hear from this group is like, do these resonate, and do any of these findings like really in particular resonate with the intersection of tribes with climate data, like non-tribally generated climate data. So our initial findings, so we really have the first 4 focus on tribes and their needs, and then there's 3 that I'll go on to that really focus more on regional and state agencies. So first, we've found that basically all tribes engage with data in some capacity. Again, that's not going to surprise anyone on this call, right? But tribes engage with data in a variety of different ways. Despite the differences in how tribes use data, we have heard basically unanimously from every conversation we've had with tribal leaders, and tribal serving organizations in the region, that existing federal and state data is not structured to and does not deliver on tribes' needs. So that's finding 1. The second is, tribes really see data. I mean, they see it for a bunch of different things, right? As a core governing asset and tool, but in particular as a key enabler for accessing federal, state, and regional funding, and really as a necessary ingredient to craft compelling narratives to satisfy grant requirements. And that's really important for organizations like SCAG, which are in a lot of ways funders of tribes and support revenue opportunities for tribes. So with bad data, it's hard for both SCAG and tribes to do their job on this. Third is tribes vary significantly in their data capacity and have different levels of access to outside resources to support their data needs. Some tribes have large in-house data operations, as I'm sure many of you know. Others are only just beginning to engage or think about how they use data. Others engage with organizations like outside consultants or university centers to support their data needs. So there's just a wide variety of how tribes engage with data right now. Fourth is tribes consistently tell us that they want to develop new data products, but that low quality data remains a key barrier for developing those products by and for Native communities. So those are 4 of the findings about, Native communities that we've heard from tribal leaders and others we've talked to. And then, we have 3 findings here about non-Native government organizations. So the 5th finding is that non-Native government agencies, processes, and structures are often poorly equipped to help build tribal data capacity. We've heard some government agencies collect data that's relevant for tribal governance, but they either can't or won't turn it over to tribes. That seems to be particularly common at the state level because of the ambiguous relationship between states and tribes. We've heard other agencies have tribal consultation processes that their own staff isn't even aware of, despite state laws in California requiring them. So our view is that when tribes aren't prioritized at agencies, that agencies can struggle to be effective governing partners. 6, we've heard about a lack of understanding of tribal sovereignty and how it contributes to misunderstandings about tribes as governance. In particular, we've heard stories of tribes being frequently confused for nonprofit organizations or developers rather than sovereign governments, and that causes problems with tribes. And then finally, jurisdictional and geographic challenges complicate data issues for tribes. A lot of tribes cross city, county, state, or even international borders. And so the way that federal and state data is delivered is often done in a way that doesn't make sense for tribes and tribal lands. So those are our emerging findings. So that's kind of the end of my presentation. Happy to take any questions or folks want to kind of talk about anything that resonates in the climate space. I'd love to do that. Like I said, the climate area is a space that we don't feel that we have done as much work as we can We probably won't be able to by the end of this project, but we think that there's a real opportunity for kind of follow-on work in this space. And so we're really interested about it. Yeah, Brett, I can stop sharing here if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that was an awesome presentation. Thank you. A lot to think about. So, okay, so I have a couple of points I want to just quickly make to Angie's question earlier and to SCAG a bit, and then I have a question for you. So first, I think as it relates to SCAGs, I think you're saying, you know, SCAG isn't exactly sure what their jurisdiction is here, what their actual like tangible action would be as it relates to this. And I think, at least in my organization and similar organizations, I've found that when organizations go about sort of recognizing and trying to address the fact that they are not currently and have not been representing tribes in their area, they go about you know, a mission of basically gap analysis and figuring out how to fill that gap. And that takes a lot of education, right? And a lot of sort of internal preparing. And then they get through that and they say, okay, we did it, now we're ready. And then there's nowhere for them to apply it right away, because all they were doing was coming up to speed, basically. And so they build all this knowledge and build all this, you know, build more cultural competency. And then, just as organizations do, they want to go tell people about it. And they want to go like show it off or something. And it's like, no, this is just you now. You are just more informed now. And now you are more prepared for when these things come up. And ideally, part of your time that you've spent becoming more prepared was understanding how to make it so there are less unintentional gaps. Basically, you know, like you are both more prepared for these opportunities when they arise, and you are better at making sure they do arise, so that you can support nations when they need it. It doesn't mean you need to go out haranguing tribal nations to work with you, but it means that you ideally have a better idea of how to better support them. So I think it's like, it can be difficult. It can be a weird thing when people do that effort, but hopefully they you know, are going through those motions and feeling okay about the ambiguity of their relationship, but understanding it more and more as they go through working with you guys and doing that. But I think a lot of this stuff will be very useful, and I'd love to follow up with you, Rob. I think I'm curious. I've heard many times that there are gaps in how climate data is served to tribes, and I think both in this group and other groups. And I'm curious if you guys are finding that the breadth of organizations working on climate data, climate services in different regions across the nations, if that breadth of people doing that is a big barrier, because it seems like a clear problem with a very confusing sort of way to remedy such a problem, because there are so many tribes and there are so many groups working on this stuff. It's hard to say, okay, how do you start filling these gaps, and how do you match the gaps to the people who could help, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would love to chat with you more about this, Brett. I will reshare my screen and share my email real quick before I kind of hand it over. But you know, I would love to talk to you about if there are any organizations that you've heard that have kind of like successfully, after they've kind of done all their internal work, been able to deploy that knowledge effectively without just like harassing tribes. So if you know of anything like that, I'd love to talk to you after the fact. But you know, the question about the breadth of organizations working in climate is a really good one. And I would say it really varies by tribal capacity. And there's kind of, I broadly speaking, I think kind of like this is a generalization, right? But there's kind of like almost two types of tribes when it comes to engaging with the breadth of data. There are some that have like really sophisticated in-house staff that are working on data work, and specifically like climate work. So you see some, like, you know, a lot of them are like, I mean, they're gaming tribes that have more resources are doing this type of stuff. But then, you know, we met with the Fernandeño Tataviam tribe non-federally recognized tribe based in the LA area, and they just put out a climate resilience plan using a lot of the sources that you all are talking about in your conversations. They did it in a way that Lori's kind of talked to me about some of the limitations on these sources when it comes to tribes, especially around the geography, but they were really able to adopt a really creative view on their homelands and their historic homelands, and kind of adopting this broader approach allowed them to adapt some of the data resources and data sources, even if they weren't a perfect fit for the geography that they live in now, around some of the way that they think about their population and their land. So we're seeing some really creative work being done, with tribes kind of across the resource spectrum. So that's kind of one group of tribes, or folks that they have a staff that thinks about this, and they have probably some professional climate data folks on staff. Those groups are not intimidated by the different sources. There's another group that I would say probably doesn't have that level of in-house capacity. And the way that those tribes, in our experience so far, have navigated a lot of this is they will kind of rely on trusted intermediaries. So if there's a university center, we've seen a couple of tribes working with USC, a couple working with Northern Arizona University, and they've kind of relied on these university centers to guide and filter out the different data sources that they think are relevant for them. In other cases, like I mentioned, they've engaged with consultants in the space who have in-house data capacity. So that's how those tribes are kind of adapting to that. I do imagine for a tribe that has not done kind of any data work, it could be quite intimidating to figure out where to start. And so the tribes that are successful, they will have probably one or two successful leaders, or really plugged in leaders on their tribal council, who are really into this stuff and have the connections. And that's how we've seen a lot of tribes operating. So I haven't heard of a specific tribe saying we're just too intimidated to start. What it will be is yeah, we don't have a ton of in-house capacity. We know some folks that are doing some of this, and we just kind of ask them what to go with. And so it kind of ends up being word of mouth. That can be good. It can also, lead to suboptimal outcomes in other cases.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And to your point earlier about the lack of ability to get funding because of lack of data, that sort of, getting funding to then contract out some data collection, and then using that data to, it's
the chicken and egg thing. Yeah, absolutely.
The chicken and the egg, and it's so difficult. But thanks. Great answer. I look forward to chatting more.
Brett. Thanks both of you, and thank you so much, Robert. If you could make sure to drop your
let me put it in the chat right now. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Lori.
Sure.
Can I mention too? I'd love to follow up with you too, Robert. I think we might need to be new best friends. I'm in your territory. I work half of my time with local governments and half of my time with tribes. And
That's
I
great.
just dropped in the chat earlier. We've been at this issue of trying to figure out how we get access to climate data to tribes for their adaptation purposes for time. I dropped something in the chat. That's what we produced for Shasta, our fearless leader, to send to the White House when she went and talked to them about climate services. So that was us summarizing some of what we see as the key barriers and potential solutions. But yeah, man, I think we can have a lot to talk about.
My co-author on this report, a guy named Manon Donahue, is one of Brookings' in-house climate experts. I wanted him to join this call, but he had a conflict today. And he's done a lot of work prior to this with indigenous nomadic people, both domestically, but then globally through the UN, and the intersection with climate. And so I think that we would love to do some specific climate focused follow-on work from this as well. And would love to do some follow-on, just maybe we should just kind of join these calls regularly and listen in. But maybe we can explore some follow-on pieces just to, so this isn't a one-off thing.
Yeah.
It's good. My work as a Yenta is done.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. That was a good connection. I think there's the data piece to talk about, but then the upstream, how does it relate to funding? Also something on my radar. Our I published something called Better Funding, which is recommendations for state and federal agencies to basically better fund tribes and local governments. It might resonate with you, but you can feel free to
Yeah,
pull out.
Please
if-
do. Yeah, I'd love to read it. Yeah.
But let's
Oh, I see it in there. Yep, great.
let's
Perfect.
have lunch.
Thank you.
Let me see if I can get my, no, I swear to Pete, my screen sharing. I'm just gonna stop because I just can't. Before my cat was on my keyboard and I threatened to follow up and eat her. And now I can't get my screen to move forward. Sorry about that. I wanted to remind everybody about the summit. Angie talked about it before. Tribalclimatehealth.org is where you can find more information, and it's November 6th and 7th down in Paula. And I think I mentioned it to you and your coworker, Robert, when we chatted. And then we'll be back in November for our next every other monthly meeting. What am I missing, Ange?
That's it. Thanks, everybody, for another good conversation. And thanks to Lori for bringing in a great speaker. We appreciate everybody's time.
Thanks, you guys. See y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.